put the card in Saka's hand, and wandered off into the snow. Beyond food and camping gear, Crooks had very few personal items with him in the yurt. One change of clothes, a solar-powered laptop and satellite Wi-Fi hotspot that he seems to have built himself, an iPod shuffle with exactly one song, Even Flow, a photograph of Vannevar Bush, and a small, utterly inexplicable selection of hardback books. 4 volumes about deep-sea exploration, including one by a former roommate, James Nestor, and a copy of Chez Panisse, Vegetables. These books are what Luca recovered and sent me. They are astonishing artifacts. Crooks annotated their pages with unrelenting ferocity, filling virtually all the white space with emphatic philosophical treatises or disjointed bursts of observation. It was as though he were reading and responding to other books entirely. In fact, he had crossed out the titles on their covers and scrawled the same new one on each. Iterating Grace. Other diary-like entries in the margins describe Crooks's pared-down monastic lifestyle. He took walks, he foraged, he dried wildflowers and grasses, he collected interesting rocks and numbered each one sequentially with a Sharpie. He devoted much of his time to contemplating ecology, which he called the ultimate operating system. And with increasing frequency, it seems, he checked Twitter. Crooks's family recently deleted his account, but he seems to have followed a long list of founders, venture capitalists, and angel investors. He began to see in their tweets hints of some elusive but irrefutable wisdom, a string of logic that underwrote the universe like code. For him, the tossed-off musings and business maxims of these men, they were almost all men, shimmered with a certain numinous luster. He contemplated individual tweets for days, sometimes weeks, expounding on them at length in the margins of his books about the sea, meditating on them as though they were koans. The answers he'd been searching for had been there, in the Bay Area's innovation economy all along, articulated unwittingly by an elite class of entrepreneurial high priests. Crooks could see that now, from his new vantage point, 5,300 miles away from Silicon Valley and 12,000 feet in the sky. Angel investor equals herald, messenger, message equals hello world, he scrawled beneath an illustration of beets in Chez Panisse Vegetables. Slowly, he began to write out the tweets himself, in various half-formed styles of improvised calligraphy. He apparently became interested in the art form after reading that Steve Jobs was a practitioner. For months, Koons Crooks transcribed tweets alone on his volcano. He worked on large sheets of paper, then pinned the papers around the yurt, where Luca eventually discovered them. They're here with me now, as I write this. All these aphorisms spread on the floor of my office. A patch of fertile ground, from which one man's spirit slowly sprouted and flowered. Crooks himself never tweeted. He never retweeted. But he had developed his own impassioned way of favoriting. Maybe you've heard the gossip around the valley and think you know how this story ends, but, as I discovered, there are a lot of misconceptions about the llamas. First of all, they weren't technically llamas, but vicuñas, gangly, small-headed camelids of the genus Vicuña. Vicuñas are reclusive by nature, but scattershot entries in the margins of Crooks's books describe the animals becoming increasingly acclimated to him. I've since read that it's not unheard of for wild animals, such as mountain goats, to approach hikers and lick them. They're attracted to the salt of their sweat, like a salt lick. Crooks's relationship with the vicuñas started with a similar phenomenon, except that the animals were drawn in by the salt of his tears. They were tears of joy, it seems. The longer Crooks was isolated, the more deeply and eccentrically his contemplation of the tweets became, and the closer he felt he was coming to a variety of enlightenment. He describes sitting outside his yurt for hours at a time, weeping, his soul swirling inside some kind of uncontrollable ecstasy. And when the vicuñas began to lick him, he writes, his weeping turned to laughter. You may have heard that he was trampled by llamas in a freakish accident. This, too, is inaccurate. And I say this based on Crooks's writings before the event, and also on photographs of the scene that Luca sent me, and which, owing to their brutality and rawness, he now regrets taking. Luca feels strongly that I mention he's since pleaded with me to destroy the photos. I have refused. Yes, there were many deep, hoof-sized contusions on the head, face, and chest, broken ribs, and a fractured skull. And yes, there were vast swarms of bites and abrasions, presumably from the animal's wiry-haired muzzles. But there was no sign of any kind of struggle or resistance. In fact, Crooks's body was positioned on its back, with its arms and legs out at perfect angles, like Leonardo da Vinci's drawing of Vitruvian Man. He seemed to have simply undressed and lain down. Then, beyond that, the many open, empty cans, the traces of the cat food he'd apparently smeared all over himself. People who knew Crooks are, of course, devastated. He seems to have acted from a place of supreme happiness and clarity, and yet his actions have only caused sorrow and confusion for the people he left behind.